Welcome to the Business Performance Podcast, where we feature expert thought leaders and cover their best strategies, stories, and advice that you can use to successfully mature your own business performance. Because as you know, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do. Now, here is your host, Henry Schneider. Well, hello, everyone. This is Henry Schneider with the Business Performance Podcast, and today it's my pleasure to talk with both Alex and Tim Porter of Underminer Studios. They are serial entrepreneurs here in Austin for over the past 10 years and doing all kinds of cool stuff with new technology. So welcome to the podcast.
Hi.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
So I guess to start off with, could you please briefly describe Underminer Studios, the types of customers you work with, and what you actually deliver?
Great. Yeah. We are actually working with companies to humanize the digital world. And from our perspective, how we do that is using augmented reality, virtual reality, and volumetric video to create tools and processes that enable more effective business.
Okay. All right. So for our viewership, could you describe what volumetric video is?
Absolutely. Tim?
Sure. So volumetric video is akin to photogrammetry or still freeze frame. So if you watched any recent sports, you'll see, especially in football, where they stop and they freeze, and you'll see all the players that are on the field, and then they spin around the players, and you can see it from all the different angles. But if instead of taking one single freeze frame, what if they could be in motion? You could actually watch the entire play from all different angles. The easiest way of looking at it is 0-point cameras. So it doesn't matter what an actor is doing, what they're looking at, or how they're entertaining or engaging. You can look at it all different directions, which allow directors and people in games, movies, training, everything all the way across the board that would normally use video, to be able to use a video that has all three dimensions involved.
I like to look at it as a way to create more interaction and communication with video. This is the newest version of video.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm just trying to see, other than like sports and games, what are the other practical applications of volumetric video?
Absolutely. We're specifically working in enabling studios to film assets themselves. Some of the benefits of being able to create these volumetric assets sort of in-house would be minimizing costs significantly for some of the expensive ways that assets are shot now, match moving, for instance. You can actually lower the experience level and understanding of the folks that you hire, because the processing itself can be automated. And ultimately, the goal is really to just increase that level of realism. So you are actually capturing people and capturing all of those macro and micro expressions in the face. Mm-hmm. And you're able to implement those assets into games, into movies, into AR and VR experiences, and especially in immersive experiences. I think there's a massive value to increasing realism, the retention, the learning curve, the ability of the user to actually engage in the environment is massively higher.
And one of the biggest use cases that we've been talking about recently is police and military training. So a lot of police and military training, unless you go into shoot houses, is flat against the screen. So you're literally like a shooting gallery. If instead you could go ahead and take those individuals out, and they're no longer in a shooting gallery, they're in a three-dimensional environment, it becomes a much more realistic experience.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. So my son is a set designer in the movie industry, and he's working in CAD/CAM. And I know he sits down, he'll design out the whole set, and then they'll put on the goggles and walk the producer through it. And then they say, okay, for director here, raise that ceiling, move that wall, and all that stuff can be done without basically no cost associated with it. So.
Exactly. And you can do that with people as well. So if they decide at any point in time they want to go ahead and change the camera angle, a lot of shots are shot in two different ways. You end up having your green screen shot, which includes the individual who was being captured, and then you have your large cutaway shot. And these cameras end up having syncing between them. So they'll redo the camera movements that were done on set, and then turn around and capture the individual while they're inside of the green screen. So those are extremely expensive cameras, and they're also very difficult to work with and tend to break down quite often.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're dealing with massive amounts of data as well.
Correct.
Yes. Yes. There is a big stack of servers that we've created a very unique processing solution to deal with the amount of data. And one of the key points is being able to optimize it down to the proper level for the output. So if you're, for instance, if you're doing a film, you would want a gigaframe because you want very high quality. But if you're doing a mobile application, you want something very small. So we're down to 1.2 megabytes per second. That's a very key part of this.
So to give you an idea on capture side, that same data comes out at about 110 gigs per minute.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because it's about a gig per minute per camera. And that was a smaller camera.
So are you looking at petabytes then?
We have altogether somewhere in the neighborhood of 32 terabytes is our typical storage, and we offload that to our clients however they want to go ahead and utilize it. Most of our clients either send it to us via a Dropbox of some sort, or more often than not, hard drives. So they mail us hard drives, and then we put it in, and then we put it back on the hard drive, and we send back the drive.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. So dealing with this now, what are the quality aspects that you have to be concerned about when you're working with volumetric video?
Absolutely. Quality starts with capture, including cameras, including following best practices. We originally started our proof of concept with webcams because we wanted to show that you can use off-the-shelf cameras to create these assets. Ultimately, if you have webcams, your fidelity is going to be a lot lower. However, the higher the quality of the camera, the higher the quality of the asset, those work well. And as far as best practices, you do need to limit some of the issues that are intrinsic with capturing in this sort of 3D format. Some of those could be very dark clothing. Some of them could be very thin jewelry or glass. So glasses, for instance, don't work well. Hat brims don't tend to work well. Jewelry, some adornments on clothing at times, and lots of flowy things. Because if you think about it, the way that photogrammetry works, you're matching up points of interest. Mm-hmm. So we're translating that into video. So we're matching moving points of interest, and so the thinner it is, the harder it is to track.
Yeah, because I can think as you're starting to stitch those images together as you move around.
Exactly. And so from there, on the quality aspect, as far as processing, does depend on the output. As I mentioned, there are very different qualifications for movies versus mobile versus games, etc. And so we want to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the client. What the assets are going to be used for. We have an entire post-process pipeline. We can output raw meshes. We can output, for instance, we can output raw meshes if that's a quality bar, and then a studio can take it themselves and edit it to their own specifications. We also have a modular post-process solution, meaning it's a la carte. You can choose the services that are relevant to your assets. So that could be anything from color correction to texture correction. We always want to make sure to reduce jitter. We want to make sure that we're smoothing the entire asset so that it looks more realistic. But we never want to smooth too much because then you lose some of that fidelity and the realism of the human face.
Yeah. Well, I know, just watching the World Series, when they do those volumetric shots, colors change, and I think the resolution changes. And it's not the really high definition stuff they have when they're shown just a single camera.
Well, so the technology specifically for the World Series was using an array of cameras. So they were doing something more akin to bullet time. If you remember the Matrix, specifically having an individual that was standing in the middle, and then they would go to bullet time, and it goes all the way around, and that's where the nickname comes from. Bullet time. Right?
Oh, so the bullet sitting there, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so the bullet would stand there. Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that had CG, and you're correct. And so that technology is kind of similar to what we do if you think instead and we can get really deep very quickly on this. Instead of the camera shooting from one to the next as they go around, doop, 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 and then we spin around, all of our cameras shoot at one time. What we do is we have an algorithm that goes through and finds information or interest points on each one of those images, and then goes through and finds combined interest points between them. So if it sees, the tip of my nose on one camera, and then it looks at an angle again over here, and it sees that tip of my nose, it goes, okay, based on camera number one, I assume that the camera distance to my nose is 3 meters. It goes ahead and it takes the next one over, and it goes, okay, I assume that the camera distance is 2.5 meters. And then what it can do is make a 3-dimensional model out of that. And so we're not talking about 2-dimensional assets. We literally have something that can go into games, movies, and as if it was a CG asset. So we're removing the need to scan people, because we are taking somebody from point A to point B without all of that extra that goes in that. So to give you an idea, the last movie I worked on was Alice in Wonderland Through the Looking Glass, and I was working at Sony Picture Imageworks up in Vancouver. We had the use of Johnny Depp, and we had brought him in, and it took 3 days to scan him, because you have to do all of the different facial movements and things like that. So you have A, E, I, O, U, and all of this eye closed and everything like that, that you go through, and that's called a facsition, which is a facial animation style of system. And then you take a body scan of him, and then you get some of his movements. All in all, he was supposed to be used for about 1.5 minutes. And what came out of it was actually the use of about 15 seconds if you watch the movie. And then, it was thousands upon thousands upon thousands of man hours and millions and millions and millions of dollars of work. For what? If we had brought him in, he would have been in and out before lunch.
So when you do that, how long does it take to process all the data so you have the resulting video that you can do?
We are down to about 12 hours per minute.
Wow. Okay.
So for every minute of output, we process for approximately 12 hours.
And that is linearly scaled. So our system is cluster-based and queue-based, which means the more that we add of any given server, the faster we go in those areas. So it is built not quite like a supercomputer, but sort of kind of.
Yeah. Okay, so when you start talking about this with people, what's some of the biggest misconceptions out there about volumetric video and quality, etc.?
Oh my, there are so many. So for instance, I think a lot of people don't even understand the term. They don't understand what volume means in this particular instance. And we do legitimately mean like it has volume. It is a full 3D asset. It is real. It is a full exterior of a person, versus a flat object. And I think because people don't even understand the terminology, they aren't even aware that they've already seen it, likely, especially with the sports, things that are going on. Football, soccer, basketball are using them very regularly for that single frame and then panning around the play. And almost everyone has seen some version of that, but they don't know that it's volumetrics. So I think that's part of it, just even recognizing even like the minute use cases of where it's popping up. What else do you think?
And even we even talked about this, on this call, the similar look between bullet time and a still of volumetric video, so like a single frame, that kind of gets people confused because they go, oh, well, it's just a 2D asset. You're looking at it from different camera angles. And no, we're actually creating a 3-dimensional object that goes, over time. So that's something that's very interesting. And then as well, the concept of complexity. So a lot of people think that, they're going to be able to do this at the same cost and price of photo and video. And sadly, it is new tech. It's been around for really about 20 years, but it's only been viable since about 2016. So
I will also say that there's a huge disparagement between the capture and the processing. Those are two very separate pieces, but the market primarily has been studios that do end-to-end, meaning they capture and process on site. You get your proprietary file type back. For instance, the Microsoft MR Studios and some other folks, Metastage, etc., 4D Views, which is a fine model. And I think it's great, especially in the beginning of an industry where you're trying to create that recognition. But I think we are working very hard to separate the two, because there is the possibility for companies that are already doing similar processing, similar capturing, like for like
photogrammetry, like capture dimensions.
Yeah.
So capture dimensions is one client that's in the Dallas area, and they have a scan truck. They literally take an 18-wheeler and they bring it on sets. And they specifically go in there, think, Hugh Jackman, he doesn't want to leave the set. He doesn't have time to, go to whatever X location. So they have a sister studio, which is part of their captures, that's in Georgia. And they literally go on set with this 18-wheeler and they capture people. That same exact concept, we work with them to allow them to not only capture photogrammetry, which are those stills that they use in movies, just like right now. They've also been able to convert their current system to do volumetric capture. So we work with them so that they can do the capture, we do the process, and then no one has to work outside of their comfort zone, which involves, massive servers for us, and for them, larger arrays of cameras.
Yeah, reducing the need for infrastructure on the studio side.
Correct.
Okay, so are there any other misconceptions about the technology that people think you can do something you can't with this?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, as far as misconceptions on what the technology can functionally do, there are a few. One of which I think is people believing that they can actually manipulate a captured person. There are ways to create opportunity with that. For instance, we have a tech that we combine volumetric heads with motion captured bodies, in which you can do a mocap sequence. You can do a lot of things. In that case, you're scanning the body and you're connecting the two pieces. But the head, or the volumetric part, is still a scripted experience, meaning you're filming a direct thing in a camera and you are watching that playback. It just happens to be in full 3D. So that's one arena.
The second one is that we can capture everything. Once again, this is the earliest ends of technology, and anything that would confuse your standard machine learning algorithm, things like reflections, refractions, obviously we talk about glass, thin objects, and the only reason thin objects are an issue is because you can't get enough points to understand its full volume. These issues that we're talking about of things that we can't capture are becoming a shorter and shorter list every single day, and the algorithms that we utilize actually are advanced past most of the competition that we have, specifically in the area of not having to have green screen. So we've worked very hard to make sure that this can be shot, I don't want to say everywhere, asterisk. It can be shot in many different places and allows for mobile solutions. So that's obviously a big movement forward in our technology. What was the last one?
Right now, we're focusing on sort of one individual asset at a time, so that we can make sure that the fidelity of each asset is very high.
Yeah.
We can always combine multiple assets after the fact.
Okay.
But capturing all of them simultaneously is not really functional right now as far as the hardware goes. So we're still working on solutions to enable that.
So what are your limiting factors now on what you can do? Is it the hardware? Yeah.
To some extent, it is definitely the hardware. And on the flip side, it is also the fact that we are using machine learning and computer vision, right? So anytime you're relying on newer technology, machine learning especially, we have to teach it. We have to teach it the ways of the world. And so we are functionally working on growing that database, growing that information so that we can have a more effective machine learning algorithm.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the biggest thing is, yes, the hardware is a major issue, but our motto and our mantra really is, it doesn't matter what you're capturing on, you should be able to produce a volumetric asset. So we can never rely on the fact of, oh, well, you know, it was the hardware's problem, it was that problem. And so we're going to do everything we can to lower that bar and cost of capture so that we can put this eventually in everyone's home.
So what I'm trying to figure out now is where are you? Are you pushing the technology, or are you using the technology and trying to stay current with it, or where are you on the spectrum here?
Yeah, all of the above. We are absolutely working every day to actually improve our processing abilities and expand the capabilities that we have within that. That does include creating the combination technology of motion capture with volumetric heads. I think that's a very accessible way for people to get into this, especially because, you know, scanning a body is a significantly less high barrier than understanding how to capture volumetrics with, you know, 15, 20, 80 cameras. Mm-hmm. So that, I think, is a good start. We are actually in the process of finalizing our SaaS-based portal. So our goal is to start working with more studios to enable them to do their own capture, and then be the processing solution for them.
All right, so what about, are you doing anything that doesn't involve human beings, but you're doing like in hazardous areas where people can't get to?
So, I mean, yeah, scanning worlds and things like that, we are more than happy to go ahead and do that. There are many people that, you know, fly drones over things, but, you know, once again, going back to our motto, we don't really do much capture. We do some capture more in the relation of how do we figure out how our processing fails? What can we do to get things in there that are going to be issues? And then how do we increase our quality of our algorithms to make those things happen? So as far as processing those assets, yes, we do standard photogrammetry as well, and that is actually going to be part of our SaaS-based model, where you can choose between doing X number of course, depending on your pay and pay level and whatnot, X number of photogrammetric assets, and then X number of seconds worth of volumetric video. So either of which are totally doable within any of the different pay scales.
Okay. We're also working with a studio now for a foreign government to potentially build out an entire studio from the ground up, meaning we are helping them create their capture rig specific to our software solution. And for this particular use case and ones where it makes sense, we can help them actually build an in-house processing solution, and they can license the software. But I think the goal really is just to get it in more hands, because right now I think it's more inaccessible than I would like.
Okay. All right, so kind of like a slightly different take. What are some of the common pitfalls and mistakes that you encounter as you start to try to process all this stuff?
Quite often when we deal with exterior data, so when people send us data, their videos aren't synced. They'll believe they're synced, and I can tell you, you know, once you start dealing with 100+ cameras, mm-hmm. and you have to be literally frame accurate between them, a single frame off on any of those cameras will cause issues. It'll cause a blur and softness and many different areas. So that's a real common one. You know,
one more is lighting.
Lighting, that's a good one.
Because, especially because the way that they're used to capturing tends to have very bright, extreme lights. That is actually very bad for our system. It causes a lot of hot spots. It causes burnout. You lose a lot of detail when you have overly lit a person, and especially if you're doing that and parts don't match up. Because of that, then you have even more issues with the fidelity.
We do have a best practices list specifically surrounding, you know, these things, and these are on them. You know, it's something like 14
more
pieces. Oh, it's longer than that now. It continues every time I get mad at something, I can add it to the list. So one of them is, you know, shiny objects. People put in thin objects, things like that. That's a real typical pitfall is people want to think that we're, at green screen level right now, where, you just put them in front of it and it cuts it out. I'm like, it's not quite there yet. So
lastly, I would say movement that is too fast.
Oh,
right now, the way our algorithm works, because we aren't using green screen, we cannot do extreme fast motion. We can't do action shots. So it does need to be scripted. It needs to have someone, performing that is willing to just slow down a little bit, play up, the dramatic parts of the scene, if you will, and really just be kind to the tech.
and sadly to that, the limitation does come from the video that we receive, and so we're working on advancing some machine learning algorithms that remove motion blur entirely. So that's what I'm on starting next week.
Okay. I'm just thinking, you mentioned about the frame rate. I guess the cameras, from camera to camera, there could be some slight differences in the frequencies and the length of the frames and all that. Trying to sync all of that up, and you get beat frequencies between.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. On the professional rigs, it's a lot less work because they can do what's called gen lock, which is basically a cable that goes between all the cameras, and it causes all of them to sync up and shoot at the same time. When we're talking about webcams, every single webcam, the tolerances are so wide. So yes, I had to create a capturing algorithm, and our syncing is specifically down to 7 picoseconds, which is 6 zeros followed by a 7. And that was a culmination between us, and we're part of the Intel innovation team, which means that there are clients, but at the same time, they want us to help advance technology. And in advancing this technology, they're more than happy to add developers to whatever we're working on, so long as we do write-ups and blah, blah, blah. And, if you look us up, you can see our write-ups and things like that we did. But they helped us with the networking side of it, because at a certain point, you need an expert to get into some of this stuff. So yeah, that was quite some time. That was actually 90% of our original proof of concept, was getting the cameras to sync, not the processing. The processing was, I
can imagine that's going to be a really tough thing, because you've got these webcams or cams in your laptops. They're not expensive, so Okay, so let's talk about a recent success that you've had helping somebody out. So,
absolutely. Yeah, so this is actually sort of not about volumetric videos for anyone, which is great, because we've done, our background over the last 4 years, since 2016, has been in augmented and virtual reality tools for businesses. And so we've done a wide variety of things. But most recently, it actually, many of our work points have culminated into a product that we created with Stealth Products called iDrive VR. And so this product is actually, Stealth does accessories and drive controls for motorized wheelchairs. Their parent company is Quantum Rehabilitation, and they were looking for a tool to help enable users, new potential wheelchair drivers, to train safely. At the moment, this particular arena, they have 6 to 8 weeks to train with a therapist, with a clinician, dependent upon availability, dependent upon their function, whether they can sit up in a chair. All of these things have to be done in this very short time period. And if they aren't done, then they do not pass. They get an X on their record. They cannot buy a wheelchair. They'll never be approved for one again.
If they decide they want to spend their own money on a wheelchair, what happens?
They get dropped from their insurance because they're a safety risk. So this is a really, really huge problem in the industry. And I think if you have limited mobility, that a wheelchair really is, it is a quality of life issue. It's not a, convenience thing. And so they came to us and they had already done a mobile version, a children's game sort of geared at understanding how to, drive a wheelchair to some extent with this mobile application. It was definitely more cartoony. They were looking for something that had more immersion. So we created a VR driving simulation that actually uses the physical drive control from the chair. Could be joystick, chin drive, head array, sip and puff, etc., to physically to drive the virtual experience. So it's a safe environment. They're not actually driving in the real world. And that really allows them to experiment, to understand how to use this drive control. It helps the clinicians see how effective the user's being in the virtual environment. And it has an entire data and analytics output that allows them to see the effectiveness on a quantitative level versus just as an opinion. And so it helps for checks and balances both for clinicians and how effective they're being with their patients and how effective the patients are being in learning these things before they're put to the test.
So it's measure like response times, and so you could do like collision avoidance. And
it does have response times. It also has information. So quite often, if you have an injury, you have a multitude of injuries. It's not just your legs aren't functional. It could go all the way up to your arm. So quite often they have an issue with what's called pronation. Pronation is how your hand angles. So if you think about you're driving a wheelchair with a joystick, if your hand cannot pronate appropriately and it's not angled to the limitness of your pronation, then you can cause issues. So it will show, oh, this person's drifting to the right. Obviously, I need to trim the left side so that it doesn't force them to go that direction, and different things like that. It does also study where the individual is looking. So if you have somebody that is either A, easily startled, or B, is not someone who pays enough attention, quite possibly that individual should not be driving a power chair. It's not a safe vehicle. These things can drive 7.5 miles an hour, and some of them weigh 1,500 pounds. This is, just under a forklift. It is not safe. And then, not only just running into somebody else, but themselves as well. So,
we did use real physics systems based on the wheelchair specifications. So the height, the wheelbase, all of the specifications about the specific chair model that is in the simulation are in there. And we were actually told by our clients at one point that they thought the virtual chair drove better than the real chair sometimes. So obviously we did a good job. We're really thrilled to create something that can really make a huge impact in an area that needs help. We know that medical is often behind on the technology curve, and I think that this just steps one little area a little bit further. And we're able to use the paradigms from our virtual reality therapy platform that we created. So levelized, gamified play. So it's enjoyable. It's not just rigid training that's, unfun. You get to go, you get to experience different worlds, you get to do different obstacles, and it keeps the users engaged.
What we call this is Prometheus effect. And the reason why is I came from an entertainment background. In entertainment, it's all about the look, it's all about the feel, it's all about the shining, the glitter. And quite often these things that could be used in much more helpful ways just get forgotten. So taking a lot of the paradigms of the work that I did in games and movies and bringing it over to something that's useful has been, kind of a motto of ours is how do we take this to another level? Specifically in this use case, how do we help people get into chairs and safely do it? And how do we make sure that they can get the time that they want? Think of having a clinician who's a little gun shy because the first time they got them in the chair, they got ran over a little bit. Maybe their foot got run over, something like that. They're going to not want to put that person into a chair. And so if we can go, hey, just put them into the chair, you're going to disconnect it from the actual drive capabilities, and they're going to sit there and they're going to do VR all day long until you feel that they're safe to do it.
Yeah, I can imagine you put somebody in a chair and they knock the joystick because they're moving around and it jerks. And, So they get to learn not to do that then too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and they got zero torque and immediately goes to 100% in some of these chairs.
Yeah. Okay, great. That's really cool. So then you're driving through your volumetric video too, I guess.
Exactly.
So, okay, so tell me about, what defining moment occurred to get you into this fascinating technology?
Yeah, so in 2012, I was actually diagnosed with PTSD, and what it was is from a number of head injuries. It wasn't anything military or police trained or anything of that nature. But offer that they gave me was either to go to therapy, talk therapy of some sort, or take medication, and neither of them actually really worked for me. So a number of years later, I was actually seeing a vestibular specialist, and this is one of three individuals who are actually in the world. He happens to live on Vancouver Island. We were in Canada at the time, in the city of Victoria, which is the capital of British Columbia, and he put me into a homemade VR experience. And it literally just sat there and tested where you both thought that your center of gravity was, your center of human self. And for him, he said, well, you believe that you're up and to the left. But nevertheless, the thing that I got out of it, and this was, of course, before VR was starting to come out, Palmer Luckey had just started working with John Carmack and started doing Oculus, and that whole thing started coming up. And some of my friends started having VR experiences, and I started watching them and the emotional effects that happened to them in these silly little experiences that, when it first came out, it was just almost nothing. But as that continued on, something that dawned on me is that you could affect emotional response. I was actually doing a showcase for a company. We had done a VR 360 playback system, one of the first ones that had come out in this new generation. And we were showing a potential client that did police and military training in the Houston area. And they wanted me to go ahead and put the shark experience, which is, it's kind of scary, it's like a jump scare, and put it on one of the guys. And, he's out of the room. He comes in. I was like, here you go. And put it on. And I'm thinking, okay, we're all going to have a little fun. And he literally takes out the headset, throws it, and runs down the hallway. I end up finding out that he also had PTSD, and it caused a issue. He didn't have a full experience, but he had heightened awareness because of this. And through that, I found out, how deeply you can affect someone's system. And the biggest thing that we found out in all of this information is you have this thing called a vestibular feedback loop, which is your center of self, because when you're in a VR experience, your vestibular system is engaged, because as you walk forward and you walk back, your vestibular system says, I've walked forward and I've walked back. When your vision lines up with that, then you create this entire loop. So your body says, I am present, I am within this environment. And then on the second side of it, you have your amygdala. Your amygdala is your fight or flight response. If you go ahead and you create a fear-based system that is around this, then you end up creating your adrenaline response. But if enough times you engage that, slowly but surely that response becomes less, and eventually you create an oxytocin style response. It's that same thing that we have when we go on roller coasters. Your brain flips. It goes from being afraid of dying to not necessarily enjoying the experience, but understanding that the experience is safe. And so out of that, that was our deepest movement into newest form of technology, and how we created our actual our virtual reality therapy experience. And Volumation was actually a spinoff from it, because we had 4 different levels, each one of them more realistic visually, and they become more like your fear and phobia. And we wanted to create a 5th one, which included real scan worlds and real scan people. So the full circle.
So what that then ends up training the mind to kind of lessen the effects then over time?
Correct.
Yes, it's actually called desensitization.
Yeah.
It's a very common sort of old school traditional method of therapeutic treatment. So exposure therapy is being exposed directly to the thing you're afraid of, and then desensitization happens when you ping that amygdala enough. One of the interesting things as well is that you're actually, when you're engaging those things all at the same time, the amygdala and the vestibular system, you're creating new memories, which I think is really amazing and impactful. That is why it is significantly more retention as far as information. That's why you get those emotional responses. That's why you can create sympathy, empathy. You can make people cry. You can make people run out of fear. All of these things are heightened because it's actually plugging into your brain in this way.
Wow, that's fascinating too. This kind of reminds me. My mother is going to be 97, but she's starting to now. I don't know. She feels like she's in because these spells where she feels like she's just things are moving. She's can't touch the ground. And I guess that may be there's something going on that you probably could kind of get a feedback there because she rationally she's not moving, but she gets all confused.
Most likely it's an issue with your vestibular system of some sort, just based off of our previous experiences.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So, so what does success look like for you today?
Success today. We are really thrilled about the prospect of building a studio from the ground up. We are awaiting the response on that bid that has been submitted to the foreign government. I think in that particular realm, that's going to give us a lot of validation with Volumation. You know, we have clients and we haven't launched the SaaS portal yet, but because volumetric video is still in its infancy, we're still doing a lot of education. We're still doing a lot of calls and just informational sort of things, talking with people, giving presentations, and really just focusing on making sure that we're trying to meet people where they're at. Because in order for us to be successful in the long term, we have to help people understand how this is accessible to them.
Mm-hmm.
And because we are really creating a new model specific to volumetric video. As far as other successful things, we also are launching the first parts of a project for a beauty company. That's an AR application that we are thrilled that we're going to be working on that for the next bit. But I think it's going to really help a lot in regard to visualization, realism, and being able to understand intrinsically that personalization for people. When you're purchasing beauty products, you really want to know, what does this look like on me? How does this affect me? And what choices do I have around these products? And we want to make sure that we're creating functional tools as always. And so we're making sure that the visual fidelity of these are very high, so it doesn't look like you've pasted things on your face like a Snapchat filter. It looks very real and it looks very much part of you, so that you can understand what the long-term choices are.
So, what are your top 3 challenges that you're facing now as business owners?
Challenges as business owner. So education is obviously number one. We are in quite often extremely advanced technology. Even this one for the beauty company seems like it's an easy thing, but it has so many small intrinsic parts that are very heavy, deep tech. And so for that, I think it's one of the heaviest ones. What's the second one?
I would say growing a team. We're definitely at a pivotal point in our company where we want to grow our team more, and we're looking at doing so, and it is hard. It is hard. Austin is a wonderful city. It is also very competitive because it is a highly technical city. Mm-hmm. And so we are a small fish in a big pond, and we can't compete against the big companies. Yeah. But we're hoping that we have a lot of other things that we're bringing to the table that we can attract some talent with.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, so right now it's just the 2 of you, right?
Yes. Yeah, we've done scalable teams for specific projects because we were primarily service-based for the last few years. We really, and very customized projects each time. We focused on creating the right team for the right project versus building out a long-term team, which may not
positives and negatives.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, it's positive, negative,
right.
And it's not the right way to do it for everyone. But ultimately, as we're growing Volumation as a product, and as we're launching this beauty product, I think that there's a lot of opportunity to bring in some people for the long term that can really help us sort of build and grow this. And then a third challenge. What's the third challenge?
Keeping the hardware up to date on a regular basis. So we're really, really, really lucky. We're part of a lot of developer programs, and quite often we don't have to purchase hardware. It's given to us, and that's great. But but it can only go so far, you know, when you have a full rack of servers and things like that. It's a daily task keeping up with making sure that nothing's caught fire.
Well, and again, that harkens back to building a team.
Correct.
We need someone, we need an IT person.
I'm having fun doing IT work.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need somebody to be monitoring all that stuff and doing preventive maintenance on it. So,
Yes, exactly.
okay, so now since you've gone through several different companies, if you had to start all over again from scratch today, reflecting back over the last 10 years, what would you do differently and what would you do the same?
I would choose one thing and one vertical to focus on. Our focus has really been on technology, which I love. And I love finding functional use cases across the board. We've done medical, we've done corporate, we've done enterprise, we've done health. I mean, you name it, we've probably dabbled in it to some extent. And ultimately, I think that does make it hard to grow a business. And while I love our company, neither one of us really wants a lifestyle business. We want to create something that can grow bigger than that and be much more impactful than that. And so I think starting with that sort of knowledge earlier on would have been helpful for us. And we're getting there. You know, we've learned a lot on the way, and we're using all that information to benefit ourselves now and push forward on our trajectory. So.
Well, you know, I kind of reckon this like the zen of business growth, because the journey is much more important than the end state.
Yes.
Sure.
Agreed.
So, what type of competition do you have? You said the major studios are doing things, but do you have any other competition companies your size for this, or are you kind of by yourself?
Our size, no. We're probably the smallest in existence. Other than, okay, so the different tiers that I would say as far as competition, there's the high end. We're talking Microsoft MR Studios. So Microsoft they actually locked their features and said they were complete in 2015. So they've been working on this for over a decade, right? And 2015, they said they're done with growing their volumetric video capabilities. Great, cool, whatever. So Microsoft Studios are way up the top. They're serving very high-end clients. Intel Studios, same thing. They are very much in the future, and they are very much serving very, very high-end budgets and clients, which is awesome. And I think there's a wonderful place for that in the marketplace, and it gives a lot of opportunity for other people to see how it's being used, because we're not going to hit all the use cases. Underneath that, I consider the next tier down sort of the Microsoft franchise studios, so MetaStage, 4D Views. I think EverCoast is in that same realm. EverCoast is actually spun out of it was originally ADI founder, and then he was a founder of Uncorporeal, and then he started EverCoast. And so I think he's in that tier. ADI is in that tier.
Was in that tier.
And well, ADI is.
ADI is defunct.
Yeah. So, and we're also seeing the rise and the fall of people that are pioneering in this space. And so we're keeping a really close eye on what's going on. Then you have some other folks like DeathKit, Scatter. They're more enabling for the filmmaker. So in my mind,
super indie.
Yeah, definitely looking like independent films, people that are doing content for themselves. And then there's EFE, which is a content
capture house.
No, they're a content platform.
Yeah,
so they're actually selling like ready-made assets for you to put in.
Okay.
They don't have a ton of assets yet, but they're working on that, and I think that's a valuable proposition as well. I think there are a lot of people that want the assets but can't do all of the work. They can't do the capture, or they can't afford the processing, or what have you. And so ready-made assets are a great opportunity there as well. And I think we're really kind of in between the franchise studios and the DIY style shooting. We're in the middle, looking to enable more studios that would be kind of at this level with the meta stages. But we also eventually want to look towards some more sort of home-based technologies where we're minimizing cameras and we're enabling people to do this that are streamers that want to do 3D video chats with their family, maybe, that's a little ways off for us right now, but that's definitely, I think, important in the long run.
Well, I'm just thinking that maybe even like home security might be an application too.
Yeah, we were actually talking about either home security or if you look at factories, being able to do snapshots of factories and things like that and seeing what happened. Yeah, I mean, think how much you could reduce your liability if you could go, oh, well, the camera didn't catch it. Well, but from this angle, you know.
Yeah. So when somebody comes to you, what's the most important question they should be asking that distinguishes you from the competition?
In volumation, I would definitely say really along the lines of what do you want to do? I guess on both of them, both volumation and Underminer Studios, it's the question that they should ask themselves is what is the end goal? What is the end result? Because we're going to provide a solution that's the best for what you want to go to within your either given budget or timeline or whatever iron triangle that you want to set as your goal space.
Okay, great. So we're ran over quite a bit here, but it's been
I have to hop on a call in just a second.
So how can people contact you to get more information?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They can find us via our website, which is underminerstudios.com, UNDERMINER Studios. Or they can email us, Alex or Tim at Underminer Studios. Pretty simple, same-ish. And we're really readily available and willing to chat with you about what your goals are around emerging technology and how we can help you find the right answers.
Okay. Well, Alex and Tim, this has been a fantastic episode today. I just really, just fascinated by the technology and all the great stories associated with it, the potential for doing good for people with what you're working on. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Business Performance Podcast. For more episodes and strategies, visit welcome.ppqc.net/blog. That's www.welcome.ppqc.net/blog. And remember, if you don't know where you're going, any road will do.